So it's time to see if we can exercise some of the demons and pull this thing out of here and replace it with a freshly rebuilt 400. Speaking of that, it's finally back from the machine shop. Oh, I spent a lot of money on this short block, but it should be worth it. See my engine stand in the back of the truck? Thanks to supply chain issues, the machine shop said, hey, we're not gonna be able to work on your engine for a while because all of our engine stands are full of customers' engines that we don't have parts for. I said, you wanna borrow my engine stand? They said, yes, we do. I wonder if I had loaned them a couple other engine stands if I would've got a discount. Here's our 400 short block. It's been bored 30 over. It's got some new rods, new pistons, new timing chain, new cam, new bearings, and the crank's been redone. So I had determined that the head's been redone on this engine before the rod bearings went. So I didn't have to have any work done to the heads. Even the machine shop said, yeah, there's nothing you need to do those. They look brand new, even though who knows how many years ago they had been done. But it's odd to have two. If you saw my video on the 66 Chevy C10, that also has a rod knock and appears to have had freshly redone heads done to it. So maybe the same mechanic worked on both engines. Anything's possible, I guess. Well, it's kind of a nasty rainy day at the shop, but trying to get some work done on the engine anyway. Got a lot of other things going on this weekend, but 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 30 minutes, an hour, you know, anything to get this moving. And make sure those mating surfaces are nice and clean. The machine shop tack welded the screen on, so I don't have to worry about that coming off. Run in there. Brand new grade 8 bolts. So, truth be told, kind of got tired of talking to the camera here and decided to just crank up the tunes and get to work on putting this engine together. So you can see here, I'm putting the heads on, and the head bolts on here. Yeah, I know, it's exciting stuff, right? Here's the other head. And you know, these heads are in great shape. And if you look at the intake manifold gasket is still on there. That's because when I painted them, I was like, well, why clean these things off? Let me just go ahead and paint this with these gaskets on here. And then I'll take them off later, which, you know, I'll end up doing later. Yeah, there's a torque wrench clicking. And then we're back to silence. I'm going to put the valley pan on, but you'll see later in the video. Somehow I screwed this up. It really doesn't look like I did, but I for sure did. Although in this photo, oh yeah, I'm just getting ready to do some more painting. I'm putting on primer right here. And if you look, you can see the earplugs that I used to plug up all of the bolt holes so that I wouldn't have to chase those threads later. You can see in there orange. And just paint right over those things. But you know, I'm pretty sure I'll talk about that later in the video. Oh, hang on. Thank God I'm a country boy. Yeah, see, I told you I was listening to a bunch of tunes. Not really sure how that country song stuck in there. But anyways, we're back to painting using Pontiac blue. And then I'm going to throw the valve covers on here just to see how it looks. And I really like those old fin valve covers. And then we'll go ahead and slap this aluminum intake on here. Looking good, looking good. Now we're going to take it back apart, scrape the gaskets off, and hit all that with a vacuum before we break out the assembly lube. And we're going to go ahead and put lifters in now. Now those lifters and the push rods that are also in that jug of oil have been sitting in there probably 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm leaving nothing to chance. I really don't want this engine to blow up when I start it up. So more assembly lube. I used a lot of assembly lube and a lot of oil putting this thing together. And we're just going to slip all of these in and then we're going to put our valley cover on. Now, this is where I screwed it up. As I mentioned earlier, not sure what I did, but I definitely screwed it up. Oh, look at this. This is where I figure out something really bad. Yeah, it's coming. At least to these gaskets. This intake will only work on the older Pontiacs that have a valley cover that has the PCV at the back. This is the newer style. PCV's at the front, and there is no hole for you to put the PCV through. I don't know how I didn't notice that. And I just looked. The engine I took this off of was a Pontiac 350 that has this style valley cover, because I was just going to go take the valley cover off it. And yeah, it's got the PCV plugged. So that's not going to work. Hopefully the one I saw on Marketplace that's nearby is still for sale. New day, new intake manifold, sort of. This giant hole here is what the other intake is missing, because this goes right through there. We'll just finish painting the old cast iron intake. This will have to do. Quick little tip. Earplugs are great for plugging up holes that you don't want to get paint in. And in this case, instead of taping everything up, I just used the old quadrajig gasket, taped over the holes in the gasket, and then plugged it into place with the earplug. You can just go like this, stuff it in, and it'll expand and fill that hole right back up. And while you can't reuse them as earplugs, you certainly can reuse them for painting. Just to pull them out, chuck them in a bag or something, and use them again. Our new oil pan. Oh, and for this I used 3 earplugs just to fill up the bigger hole. Still works. As a matter of fact, this should be dry enough. There. That'll be fine. And then over here on this mess of a workbench, I am upgrading the points distributor to Pertronics. I actually have a video on my channel on how to do this already, so I'm not going to show you how in this video. So I'm definitely throwing the distributor in here just to keep the oil pump rod from falling out while I flip the thing upside down. And wow, is that engine heavy. It is unlike most engines I've flipped. The Pontiac engine definitely weighs a lot. Now I get this oil pan on here, and I'm going to use some new jag bolts because the old bolts were pretty disgusting, and they were mismatched sizes when I took them apart. It's kind of strange. So I opted for some nice fresh bolts. Certainly the way to go. And yes, I'm using the engine hoist to turn the engine back over. I think I'm where I want to be with the engine. I decided not to put the intake on. The aluminum intake I had planned on putting on the engine before I put it in the car, but the cast iron intake just weighs, I don't know, like 5 times as much as the aluminum intake. And this engine's already pretty heavy. I mean, I can't even spin the thing on the engine stand without having to use the engine hoist. Yeah, it's time to get to work taking some stuff off of here. So when pulling an engine, I typically start by disconnecting everything going to the cooling system, like the radiator hoses and all the heater hoses. And I take off the transmission cooler lines and get those out of the way. I usually like to have a bag to put all the bolts and stuff in. You can label that. Then we get that radiator out of the way. After that, I want to take off the alternator and the fan belts. That alternator later becomes a problem. And this fan didn't really want to come off, but eventually it did. Taking off the cap and wires really helps clean up the old engine as well. Alright, I think it's time to get it up in the air and crawl underneath and disconnect a bunch of stuff under there. Wish me luck. I've been under there for a while. Alright, well, it's about 10 o'clock Friday night before Memorial Day weekend. And gotta get it off the jack stands, and I think it's ready to rig up the chain and pull this engine and transmission. First I gotta get off the jack stand. the Harbor Freight jack stand, so shouldn't be very hard. Should just technically just fall right off. That was a joke. Relax. I got lots of Harbor Freight stuff. Well, it's 11 now. Ready to try again. You know, there's really not a whole lot to narrate when you're pulling the engine out. You basically jack the engine up, pull it forward. Jack the engine up, pull it forward. Jack the engine up, pull it forward. You know, you might have a ground cable or two you forgot to disconnect that you got to disconnect. And you'll just keep running into things like that and just jacking it up and pulling it forward, jacking it up, pulling it forward. And eventually it's sitting on the floor. It's officially out. All right, before I call it a night, I want to get this transmission off of here. I remember the engine is locked up, so I have to just take the bolts out of the transmission, pull it off, and the torque converter is going to stay on the flex plate. So fortunately I have some new seals for the transmission, so if the torque converter shreds it on the way out. Good night. All right, well, bright and early Saturday morning. It's not really that early. I kind of slept in. Yeah, doing a little shop cleanup first. Oh, what a mess. Transmission's finally clean enough to call it, well, I don't know, presentable, I guess. Replace this seal and the seal on the tail shaft. You know, in the old days, I would have just powered through this and not worried about all the antifreeze and transmission fluid on the ground. The thought of lying in transmission fluid just doesn't do it for me anymore. Well, the day's kind of gotten away from me. So all I really want to do is get the engine mated back together with our transmission. There it goes. When it smashes your fingers, you know it's in. Use some new ARP. Flywheel's all torqued down. Time to get this sucker on here. Alright, Sunday night, and exhaust manifolds are fixed. Thanks, Walt. Now it's time to put them on. Okay, I think our engine is where I want it to be. Still got a couple things to do to the car, and then this engine's going in. Probably not tonight though. Probably tomorrow morning. Time to put the engine in. Okay, so this might surprise you, but putting an engine in is a lot like taking it out. Only instead of jacking it up and then pulling it forward, now you let it down and push it back. And eventually, and I mean eventually, you get the thing into place. This is, I think I'm doing 10 times speed right here, so you can imagine just how long it took me to get the engine in and finally into the correct position. And sometimes you have to, right here I'm using a floor jack to lift up the tail shaft of the transmission to get over the transmission cross member. But eventually, I get everything in correctly, and it all just falls into place. All right, I can only vamp for so long. It definitely took quite a bit of time to get this thing right. The exhaust was in the way, the transmission crossmember was in the way, everything was in the way. This car is a demon, I swear. But eventually, I got it done. All right. Our exhaust is now in a much better place. Got some therapy at betterhelp.com. I'm not really sponsored by them. I just always wanted to say that. If you get it close, I can wrestle it the rest of the way. Alright, well, it's sort of in. I'm gonna have to get underneath it and see if it's lined up with the motor mount bolts. It's not like a small block Chevy where it's got like a clamshell thing that just comes down. No, it's a bolt that just goes through a hole into the mount. So it has to be lined up perfectly. And I think it still needs to go back, like maybe a ½ inch. All right, I moved the car forward some. Actually, the light's better here. And there also isn't a puddle of transmission fluid underneath it. Well, it is, but it's at the back now. Yeah, that's the lazy way out. I'll clean it up later. For now, I need to get this up on jack stands so I can crawl underneath it and start connecting everything underneath. I'm going to do everything under the car before I do anything on top. Alright, I'll be underneath it for a while. Yeah, this has been taking a while. Transmission mount, wasn't very friendly. Engine mounts lined right up, but I thought I'd better check the exhaust. Yeah, now I'm going to have to jack up this side of the engine just a little bit so I can get the Y pipe to fit in here properly. With the exhaust manifolds fixed and they have studs on them now, one of the studs might be a little too long and the exhaust flange won't fit between the stud and the frame. That should be enough. Yeah, I think I'm finally done underneath. Now I need to get to work on some of the stuff up top. It took way longer than I wanted. It's early afternoon. Time to get a little oil going. Next up's top dead center, then we'll set the distributor for good. Time for the intake. And we're back with the correct gaskets this time. So intake's finally going on. Okay, that's a whole lot of boring. Let me just shut that down for a little bit. Intake's finally done. Now I'm going to do things like place this negative battery cable. This one's a little bad. Oh yeah, you know, we got to put the our cap on. Plugs. Well, new plugs are already in. Got to put the plug wires on. First, I'm going to do the carb linkage. This has a kind of a manual carb linkage that instead of a cable, it's a rod, and I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work fine with the Q-Jet, but I need to install it first before I put the Q-Jet on. It's a little funky, but I think it'll be all right. It's got this arm. These go in a hole on one side. This goes in a hole on the other side, and the whole thing pivots. This rod has a little rod that's connected to the gas pedal on this side. This, of course, goes to the carburetor. It's got a lot of adjustment on it, so yeah, probably work nicely. As long as I don't lose the little C-clip. You know, I don't know if they make those really nice reusable valve cover gaskets like they do for small block Chevys and big block Chevys. I mean, they might, but these came with the rebuild kit, so I'm using them. They're free. Well, I mean, not really free, but they're part of the kit. So there, let me just let that set up for 5 seconds and put it on. And then carburetor and get that linkage working properly. And then spark plug wires. If you can you see that? The vacuum line going to the transmission is plugged up. That's not a good sign. Carburetor going on here doesn't have that fitting anyway, so I'm just going to cut that off and put a vacuum hose on it, and well, I guess we'll find out what the deal is. It might mean that I'm going to have to do some work on that transmission. Never ends. So I did have to get this off the old carb, but this should work. You know, I rebuilt the Edelbrock carburetor to put on here, but not on this intake. I suppose I could have put a PCV in the valve cover, but it just seems dumb. I'm tempted to put a battery in here and just see if it'll crank. I mean, it should. Gotta keep working on the carburetor. I gotta tell you, this car is so hateful. It just wants to fight. That's all it wants to do. It's fighting me every step of the way. All I want to do is give it a running engine, running, driving. I could have LS swapped the damn thing and been done by now. Instead, I went with a Pontiac engine. Anyway, let me just keep working on this. Putting on the fuel filter. Yes, I know this is a cheapo Chinese fuel filter. And it's not going to last long at all. I got 5 of them because the gas tank doesn't seem bad, but with this car, who knows? It'll probably just blow up or something. But I pumped some of the gas out, and the gas didn't even seem skunked, which is really odd because this thing hasn't run in years and years and years. So I don't know why it's not just varnish, but it's not. I decided I would just run it through, put some fresh gas in there, and then run it through a bunch of these filters. And then I'll put a nicer filter on. But yeah, anyway, it's fighting. I wish it would stop and just let me finish putting it together, but that's probably not going to happen tonight. It's weeknight, it's almost 11 already. So I'll be stopping here just as soon as I'm done with the fuel line. Well, I guess I lied and I didn't leave and go to bed. Did a little bit more work to it. It's still not ready to run, but you know. Now I am going to bed. It's midnight. But by the way, that's why it's called Midnight Road Garage, because I always find myself out here past midnight, you know, working on cars. Because I have a real job and then I do this. So that's why it's called Midnight Road Garage. Anyway, be back momentarily. Apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm hoping it doesn't fall. But it might. Alright, well, the car actually cranks. That's more than it's ever done. I probably have starting fluid. Yeah, I probably do. We'll squirt of starting fluid just to see. Okay, so it's way too late to be looking for starting fluid, but I just find my little can of gas. Just a little tiny bit of gas. Y'all heard that, right? All right. Something smoking big time. That's why we don't do this stuff late at night. Something was smoking over here, so we must have a crossed wire somewhere. All right, I'll find that tomorrow. But it did spit. I heard it. I heard it spit. Good night. All right, new day, and I've got a different jump starter on here. This one's actually pretty cool. It's a JF Ego. This is the 820, 8250 heavy duty jump starter. It's pretty cool. It's also a little air compressor. There's definitely, I'm just gonna put a little bit of gas in here. Definitely an issue with the wiring on this car right now. I think our voltage regulator might be bad. This alternator's got an external voltage regulator. I might just bypass all of that and switch it to an internally regulated alternator. But let's see if it'll start. So when the smoke starts coming out of the voltage regulator, that's always a bad sign. It's been a couple days since I was last down here, and well, to be honest, I'm only down here for a couple hours today, and I'm going out of town tomorrow for a week. So this project just keeps getting pushed back further and further. I thought I'd at least take a few minutes to take a look at this wiring. It occurred to me that this car might have been sitting for another reason other than the engine being locked up, because originally they just said that they stopped driving it because because the engine was froze from sitting, right? So why would the engine freeze from sitting unless there was some other reason to begin with? And I think I found it. This wiring harness didn't look that great to begin with, and now it really doesn't look good. Voltage regulator was smoking quite a bit. So typically that means we've got a dead short somewhere, and I'm guessing it's just in this wiring. With it all disconnected, it doesn't smoke, so at least there's that. Back from about a week-long business trip. In my rush to try and get this thing running before I left on said business trip, mistakes were definitely made. Remember all that weirdness with the intake manifold? Well, I figured out what happened here. So this is a 1971 engine. But the heads that are on here are newer than that. So this 1971 intake, which was on here when I got the engine, but was really kind of kludgy, and I wasn't sure whether or not it'd ever run. These are 72 and up heads. So they won't work with this intake manifold. Yeah, they won't work with that intake manifold. They will, but you gotta mess with the gaskets because there's this exhaust cutover. And I wasn't paying attention when I put it together. I was just trying to slap the thing together. I was going to use that aluminum intake, and then that fell through. So in my haste, I just threw the cast iron one on here. And then also, turns out that the valley pan is leaking like a sieve. So somehow I put that on wrong. Long story short, intake manifold's got to come off. The valley pan has to come off. That has to be redone. Hopefully it's not bent or something. I'll find out when I take it off. I've already ordered new gaskets, and the easiest way to make this work is I'm going to have to track down an aftermarket intake. I think I got a line on an Edelbrock Performer. That'll work just fine. So we'll see, and you'll find out in a second. I'm glad Marketplace exists because source and intake. One Edelbrock Pontiac Performer. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time cleaning it up. This is deja vu. Yeah, oh, definitely hose this down. Okay, we'll reconvene tomorrow and figure it out. Here's our final product on the Edelbrock Performer intake. I just went ahead and painted it blue after getting it as clean as I possibly could. It still didn't really look like much, so I just went with the Pontiac blue. Looks much nicer now. Well, I know it doesn't look like it in this video, but I'm kind of long overdue for an update on this. It's probably been at least a week or so. I did get an intake manifold back on. It doesn't appear to be leaking now. The valley pan doesn't appear to be leaking, so that's good. Trying to source a wiring harness because this one's pretty jacked up. Also working out some power steering issues. Switching to a newer style pump just because of the alternator power steering pump setup on this. This is probably from like a 80, 81 Firebird or something like that. And these hoses are rotten, so that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is replacing that. You know, none of the local auto parts places had 3/4 inch heater hose. I had to order this from Amazon. Go figure. You used to be able to walk into any parts store and buy this. I guess that is a thing of the past. This is definitely the right hose for this car. It's made by a company called Evil Energy. It's really fitting. We just had a visitor come into the shop. Can you see it behind me? It's a baby deer. A little fawn in the shop. I hear him all the way in the back over there. Let me turn the camera around and see if I can just kind of chase him out. I think he's going to come around this way. Hopefully head for the exit. There. Now turn right and out the door. Woohoo! This is why I can't get anything done on the Catalina. Strange things like that keep happening. I mean, who would have thought a baby deer would come wandering through the shop? Only I can remember what I was about to do. Right, drive shaft. Hopefully you can tell from the dirty hat, the drive shaft is reinstalled. And transmission mount, tighten back down. Well, I've got it back up in the air. Replacing the starter and that crispy wiring harness. I've actually already replaced the wiring harness. Of course, the nut on the new starter is a different size than the old starter. It didn't come with a new nut, so now I'm going to go buy one. I could just dig through all the nuts I have kicking around, and I'm sure I could find one. But it's about 100 degrees out here today, and I think I could use, some quality time in the AC. So I think it's time to see if we can get this to run for more than just a few seconds. I've hooked up a battery charger because there's no charging system at the moment. Yeah, I know the alternator's there, but it's not doing anything other than helping out the water pump. So, let's try it. Well, we're definitely smoking up the shop. Won't stay running unless I keep my foot on the gas a little bit, so see if I can fix that. I can figure out where all that smoke's coming from. Well, it looks like it's just coming off the exhaust manifolds. I've been doing a lot of stuff with LS engines and, well, engines that you don't need a timing light for. So I can't find my good timing light, and I don't have a whole lot of faith that one of my backup lights, which is a old Sears model, is going to work, but, oh. Well, maybe it will. It's at least lighting up for some weird reason, but let's give it a shot. Yeah, that just happened. I wish I'd had the camera rolling when that blew off of there. So sadly, I think we're going to have to do the brake upgrade on this sooner rather than later. That master cylinder is shot, and if I'm going to go through the trouble of replacing that, I'm definitely going to just go ahead and upgrade it to power brakes. But for now, we need to see whether or not the transmission works. I don't even know if the transmission works. I got a wheel chalk behind it, so we'll put some transmission fluid in it and find out. There's nothing showing on the stick, so I know I dumped a lot of it on the floor. It still wants more, but we're probably safe to test it. Moving backwards, okay. All right, transmission test, success. No brakes. I think I'm pretty much done with this video. I think we've exercised some of the demons for sure from this old girl. She runs now. Still need to do some tuning. The charging system's not right yet. Still, that's a work in progress. That'll be in the next installment maybe, or I'll do an update or something. But still got to do a front disc brake to power brake conversion on this thing. I actually looked for a master cylinder for these old manual drum brakes. I couldn't even find one easily, so I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to have to upgrade the whole mess, which I was planning on doing anyway. So anyways, that's upcoming. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. You can take a better look at it. Here's how we ended up looking like in the engine department. That's not really screwed down, but there you go. Hood's not on yet because there's only one of me, and this one is a little awkward for just one person. So next time one of my buddies is over here, we'll take care of that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little adventure. Like, subscribe, comment. See you down the road.